As of November 13, 2016, Hillary Clinton has amassed 630,877 more votes than her opponent, Donald Trump, in the election for the highest office of a federal Democratic republic. Everybody knows what should happen in every other race for every other office in such a government, which is that Hillary Clinton should win. To declare otherwise is to deny the very existence of 630,877 people. It's a small percentage of the total, but it's still a massive number of people. These passionate, active voters might as well be dead. Their voices are going unheard. The reason for this is the Electoral College, an institution as outdated as it is menacing to the future stability of the nation. However, there's nothing preventing the electors from doing the right thing and honoring the popular vote. There has been some trouble on the left about the Electoral College potentially honoring the popular vote because of the backlash that would inevitably result from Trump supporters. I'd like to convince you, Democrats, independents, and anybody who thinks that Trump should not be the president, that although your misgivings are legitimate, the most ethical thing that you can do right now is to contact red state electors and use the popular vote as a leverage in an attempt to get them to overturn the norms of the Electoral College. We might be living in a most crucial moment, and by resisting this movement, you might stifle the chances of positive electoral reform for the rest of our lives. The Electoral College is bullshit, and if you think it's not, think again. Really think about how certain votes get weighted heavier than others by the middlemen that are the electors. It's extraordinarily arbitrary. The number of electors in a state is supposed to be roughly equivalent, proportionally, to the population of the state. It's no coincidence that the most populous states have the most electors. Clearly, the intention of the founders was to honor the popular vote in the most efficient, accurate way that they were able to at the time. They had to have each state send people to Washington. They couldn't just report vote totals because they could be lying. People had to show up and be counted. The founders never intended to allow the less popular candidates to win. They were doing the best that they could with their capabilities to institute a federal republic. Those methods are obsolete today and they need to be upgraded. There have been some popular arguments buzzing around the internet in favor of the Electoral College that need to be debunked. The first is that a direct democracy is dangerous because of the tyranny of the majority. I agree. Direct democracy is clearly not the most efficient way to run a country. You need to have people who devote their entire lives to studying policy and weighing evidence. In a direct democracy, everybody is a politician in their free time. I don't want a country that's run by hobbyist politicians. Some great things have come from ballot measures, and I have a lot of faith in the good that they can accomplish for society, but the entire government cannot be run that way. The Electoral College is not our firewall against direct democracy. Our representatives are that firewall. They work day in and day out to create, advocate for, and pass policies and laws that they and their constituents feel are important. However, and this is key, our representatives should actually represent the majority of the population. If a candidate is picked by more people, that person becomes the most representative person between the choices given. This applies to the president as well. There's no reason why the president should not be picked by popular vote when every other office in the land is selected that way. Another argument is that the Electoral College gives people in rural and less populous states more control over the outcome, which is justifiable because otherwise they'd have their federal laws effectively determined by people from other states. This is wrong on multiple levels. First of all, the Electoral College does exactly what this argument says it protects against. It makes the swing states alone responsible for determining the outcomes of the president, and all other states become bound to their will. It also makes the least populous states in the country worthless because the least populous states are never crucial for victory for any candidate. The swing states range in population from New Hampshire, which is the 42nd least populous state, to Florida, which is the fourth largest, population has nothing to do with determining whether or not a state is weighed heavier by the Electoral College. But the population does have a lot to do with determining exactly how much a vote is worth in each state. People in certain states are worth less than people in other states. This is the only explanation for why a popular candidate would lose. It's just that voters in the minority were weighted higher on average arbitrarily. To verify this, you just have to divide the population by the number of electors for a state. There are 538 total electors, which means each one must represent 1.67 million people if the population of the US is 350 million. Needless to say, there are rounding errors. To determine them, you need to calculate a value from population sizes by dividing the population of a state by the number of electors this state has. This value roughly represents the vote potential per elector, which is highly accurate if you assume that all states have roughly equal proportions of people ineligible to vote, which children, non-citizens, felons, etc. In reality, it's probably only somewhat accurate, but it provides a decent, easily calculable measure of vote weight in presidential elections. For California, divide the total population, 38.8 million, by the total number of electors, 55. You get 705,454 potential votes per elector. That's how many votes Californians need to cast for one real vote in the Electoral College. This value is only meant to show that the ratio of number of electors to population is not accurate between states and contributes to the risk of electing a popularly losing candidate. In Kansas, the population is 2.904 million, and dividing that by the number of electors, 6, equals 484,000. It takes far fewer people in Kansas to cast one real vote for president than it does for Californians. In this way, as far as the presidential nominating process is concerned, Californians are worth a little more than 3/5 the amount of Kansans. People being worth 3/5 of other people should sound familiar to anybody who has studied American history. Is this the country that you want to be? The swing states are important only because in the Electoral College, in every state but two, it's a winner-take-all system. These are the states that candidates truly cater to. They make promises to the people of these states for only one reason: the races are close. That metric is completely arbitrary. You could be living in a time and place where the population of Democrats and Republicans are close by circumstance of your birth alone. People in swing states tend to enjoy this system because they are privileged during campaigns, and that is understandable, but untenable. As a citizen of a swing state myself, I request that everybody stop defending this system because it's disgusting and indefensible. The winner-take-all aspect of the Electoral College is also worth debunking because it's also bullshit. It effectively deletes a large minority in every state but two. Imagine if instead of winner-takes-all, minority vote shares in every state were added to the total and counted in the final decision. How would campaigns look if Republicans thought that it was important to increase their minority in California to offset losses in New England? How would campaigns look if Democrats could focus on rallying minorities in the South to offset losses in the Midwest? If their votes mattered at all, we might see political campaigns actually care about these places that might otherwise be neglected for the rest of our lives. This would happen in a direct popular vote system that doesn't delete votes or weigh them differently based on location. This brings me back to my friends, the liberals, the independents, and the Democrats, who have now been spurned twice by the Electoral College in less than 2 decades. You currently have the will of the people. You have political legitimacy at this moment and this moment alone to challenge this system. The people have the power to influence the electors, who are not bound by law to vote for the candidate of their state's choosing, to help them do the right thing for the future of the country. Moving on, criticisms of this movement from the left must be addressed. Some minority of Trump supporters would react violently to these events. There can be no doubt about that. Should we be deterred by this threat? Consider this. What would have happened if Trump was in Hillary's place? Anybody who's been following politics even a little bit knows that Trump would not commit to conceding if he lost the election. I believe he was talking about this exact situation. If he had the legitimacy derived by a popular majority, but was prevented from attaining office through an arbitrary system, every single one of his supporters would have claimed that the system was rigged, and there may have been great turmoil in this country by that decision. I saw a lunatic on Twitter threaten violence if Trump lost for any reason at all. That lunatic was actually former Congressman Joe Walsh. Can you even imagine what would happen if Trump lost in the way that Hillary did? I doubt any Trump supporters have made it this far, but if they have, you can't deny it to yourself. There would have been outrage. I would have been outraged too. This goes beyond right now in this time and place in this election. What happens if someone worse than Trump rises to power in the same way in the future and then loses the electoral vote but wins the popular vote? What violence will be wrought over legitimate cries of rigged in the future? This system is a veritable powder keg. For the stability of our nation, we must end the possibility of a less popular candidate winning the election. The potential backlash today, I think, would be inferior to the potential backlash from the possibility that I described above, and the ethical calculus necessitates the stance that the Electoral College must go as soon as possible in the next 4 weeks, or at least it should honor the popular vote. Finally, the idea that it's okay because it's always been this way is infantile and repulsive. People who make that point embarrass themselves. It has never been legitimately challenged because an unfair outcome has only occurred 5 times, which is 1 in 9 presidents, by the way, a rate that is legitimately terrifying. The first 3 happened in the 19th century before women and minorities could even vote. While I'm sure people were upset by those outcomes, the white male property owners in the 19th century certainly were never going to upend the system in response to that unfair outcome. Everybody my age and older remembers the 2000 election, and people were bewildered and outraged. The difference this time is that social media has enabled the spreading of ideas at a much faster rate than was possible even 16 years ago. There are only 5 weeks between the popular election and the electors voting. A large-scale grassroots political movement could never have even been created in a few weeks 15 or 16 years ago. So I ask you, ignore Vox.com, ignore The Atlantic. They are spineless institutions who beat around the bush over the most fundamental issues of our nation. This is not a time for inaction. You need to support this movement for the integrity of the future of the nation. Trump supporters, look deeply at the system and the outcome. This is the rigging that Trump was really talking about, especially towards the end of the race. This benefits everyone today, except Donald Trump and those who believe in his platform, and that's an obstacle. But it will benefit everyone alive in 100 years to end the Electoral College or force them to uphold the popular vote. We cannot risk potential violence in the future because the most popular candidate loses the election due to an arbitrary system from a different time.